and you like that transparent, holographic, precise imaging, dissecting of the music kind of sound, I don't think you can get much better than the Vox 3A. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about the SoundKaos VOX 3A bookshelf speakers. They came to me for review direct from SoundKaos. I've been eyeballing these speakers for the last year or so. I've read a couple of reviews. I saw some comments about them on a couple of forums. And they are tiny, right? They are kind of bespoke quality. They use high-end parts. They're handcrafted in Switzerland, made of real wood, so you're not going to get any pressed wood or particle board here with these. They come with two kind of stand options, metal or wood. I was sent both of them to try out for myself, and I'm going to tell you guys what I think of these speakers. Now, I've been able to hear a lot of bookshelf speakers in my lifetime. Last year I reviewed the Dynaudio Heritage Special and I proclaimed it the best bookshelf speaker I personally have ever heard for my tastes. I still stand by that. The Vox 3A is a more expensive speaker than the Dynaudio, and it is a different flavor still. Once you get into this kind of quality of audio, there's no better, there's no such thing as the best, there's such a thing as different. And so I will talk about these little Vox 3A speakers, what they did in my reference room, the pros, the cons, and I'll also talk about what they sound like in compared to something like my Fleetwood DeVille's, which is a more expensive speaker, and the Dynaudio Heritage Specials, which are a less expensive speaker. So let's get right into it. The Vox 3A is a small, diminutive, tiny speaker. It's maybe about a quarter the size of my Fleetwood DeVille, maybe a third. The bass, the specs, the bass goes down to 35 hertz from these little guys, thanks to the two 110 millimeter drivers on each side, which is covered in a metal mesh. It's like a bronze colored mesh, looks very attractive. The main driver is a full range 110 millimeter driver. The treble comes from a ribbon tweeter up on top of the speaker that also has a bronze kind of shell casing over that ribbon tweeter. And what's really cool, the ribbon tweeter being on top of the speaker is what makes these speakers do something so magically, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So they're really well made, little jewel-like instruments, if I can be honest. They're more like instruments than they are speakers. But one thing I have to say, they come from a small company with passion behind them. And one thing to look out for in hi-fi today is a lot of those name brands we grew up with, or that we talk about with pride, or talk about the good old days of hi-fi. So many big brands today have been taken over and they're run by corporations. What does that mean? That means the passion has been sucked. Not all of it, but you can tell that the passion is being sucked from some of these companies because it's all about profit rather than passion. Does it sound unique? Is it made with pride and passion? That's what I look for when I pick the pieces I purchase. The SoundKaos VOX 3A falls into this category, right? They are not going to be in everyone's living room. You're not going to go down the street and your neighbor's going to have a pair of VOX 3As in their living room. So that's what I like. And you can tell when just looking at the VOX 3A that this passion went into the design, the build, the details, right? Now this is not a bi-wireable speaker. It's set up for just a standard pair of speaker cables. The stands, as I mentioned, come in wood or metal. The base plate is metal and bronze colored. There's also the metal option for the main stand, which is also looks like a bronze. It looks really sharp. There's also a wood option. Now in the manual, it says if you use the wood stand, you're going to get a little more bass performance from the speakers. If you use the metal stand, they're saying you're going to get a little more treble performance from the speakers. I tested both. I did hear this, but it was so minuscule, the difference. A lot of people probably won't even hear the difference. So I went with the metal stand because I think they look really nice. All right, so here is the Vox 3A. This is the metal stand. You can see it's really thin, but it kind of completes the look. Now here's the wood. You can change that metal out for the wood if you want. So it is cherry wood, just like the speaker. The samples that were sent to me, these are the cherry wood examples. So this is what the cherry looks like. I'm usually, my preference usually leans towards the darker woods, but these cherry wood look really nice. They have some nice details in the wood. So what about the sound, right? After they came in, I was unpacking them. Debbie's like, are those for the bedroom? I said, no, these are review units. They're gonna go into the reference room. She's like, wow, those are so small. What are they gonna sound like? And I'm like, I don't know, let's go find out. So we moved the DeVilles back into the back of the room, and I placed the Vox 3As in the exact same position that the Fleetwood sat in, the same position that the Klipsch Forte 4 sat in, the same position that the Dynaudio Heritage Specials sat in. I fired up some music I knew well. I was driving it with a really good synergistic match, the Enlium Amp 23R. Sound Kaos says that is a great synergistic match, as does Enlium. So away we went doing DAC duties. I had a couple of options here. I have the Grimm MU1 streamer, which is an audiophile high-end streamer. That was going into a Dana Fripp's Terminator Plus DAC, which is one of the best DACs I've heard to date. I also had the Hi-Fi Rose 150B doing streaming and DAC, and I also tested this little mini setup with just a Blue Sound node using the Blue Sound for streaming and DAC, and I'll talk about what each of those sounded like. But I put those speakers in, and I had the Grimm and the Dana Fripp's, the Enlium. I turned on some music, and I was just so disappointed. I said, where's the bass? Remember any of you who grew up in the 80s, the old Wendy's Where's the Beef commercial? I said, Debbie, where's the bass? Where's the bass? And what I was hearing was a lot of high end, a lot of treble energy, which was amazingly airy and detailed, I must say, not fatiguing. I heard a little bit of bass in the mids, a little bit, but I wasn't hearing any foundation to the music. So I remember reading a comment where someone said they saw these at a show and they were looking for a hidden subwoofer because the bass was so prevalent. Now, I like prevalent bass, but only when it's tight and musical. You can have prevalent bass in a speaker, but it could sound sloppy and loose and ruin the music. I don't like those kind of speakers, but I do like some kind of body and foundation to the music because I believe it adds that humanity to the music, right? That personal, emotional touch comes from those frequencies sometimes, in my opinion. So I thought something was wrong with the speakers, so I wrote the manufacturer. They said mess with setup, gave me some tips. So over 3 days and several hours, I was putting them in every conceivable position in my room. And I finally hit on 2 setups that were so amazing and magical sounding, and 2 completely different positions in the room that created 2 different kinds of sound. First, I tried a near field listening setup. I remember doing that with some really small speakers a few years ago, and just recently I had some Falcon LS3 gold badge in here, and they were beautiful in a intimate near field listening setup. That means you're bringing the speakers really close to you, and you're towing them in towards your ears, and you're forming almost like a triangle from where you're sitting to the speakers, right? And when I set up the Vox 3A in this way, they were extremely transparent. Probably the most transparent speakers I've ever heard. There was some more fullness in the mids and a little more bass. I was hearing the bass lines tight and tuneful. They weren't exploding out of the speakers with any kind of force, but you can hear the intricacies, the intimacy of each track, right? One thing I noticed in this near field position, these speakers excelled with vocals, with piano, classical, chamber music, jazz. But if I put on any kind of music that needed a mid-bass kick, they did not sound good. Rock and roll, heavy metal, they just kind of sounded too thin and grating with all those guitars and that high treble energy without as much bass. So I went on to place the speakers in a position where I found more bass coming from them. I pushed them farther back into the room, way closer to the side walls. This brought out the bass. I finally said, there's the bass, there's that 35 hertz that they're rated to. And the mid bass was stronger, and I could play rock, and I was listening to Hitchhiker from Neil Young, and I was like, oh, I was so into the performance. That song is Neil with his electric Les Paul, and he's just jamming, right? And the sound quality, the vocals, it's just so present. And I was like, wow, these can be addicting, because what they excel at is the treble energy. That ribbon tweeter on top pushes the high frequencies up into the room instead of out and into your face. What does this mean? This means you're not going to get listening fatigue. Even if you have them set up wrong and you're hearing a lot of that high frequency, it's not going to fatigue you. It's going to wow you with its amazing airiness and holographic nature. But when you position them in the right way, or in a small room, these would be beautiful in a small room. So intimate and there and real. These speakers disappear better than any speaker I've ever had in my life. Literally, they're gone, they vanish. It's as if the speakers are not there. Now, my Fleetwood DeVilles do this to some extent. The Dyn Audio Heritage Specials do this to some extent. A lot of speakers do this to some extent. They can disappear. Usually the smaller speaker, the better if you're looking for the disappearing magical act. The Vox 3As completely disappear, and all that was left was the music in the room. I've talked about this with other devices and speakers, where when this happens, the music almost becomes part of the air. It's almost like the particles in the air become little mini speakers, and you just hear the sound from all around you. These are very holographic. These are very precise in the imaging department, right? If you're someone who craves detail, transparency, the way these Vox 3A speakers dissect the music is completely unbelievable, actually. I've not heard anything do it to this level. And at the same time, they're not fatiguing me, which in the past, if I heard speakers that did this so well, they would be hard and brittle sounding. They're an instrument, as I said. They breathe music. You have to set them up right, though, and these are a challenge to set up. I was ready to give up on them and send them back, but I kept pushing and kept trying different positioning methods, and I'm so glad I did, because these are kind of the opposite of my Fleetwood DeVilles. And we'll talk about comparing the sound quality between some other speakers. The Fleetwood DeVilles are much larger, so they're more of a full-range speaker. The bass is more prevalent, the mid-bass is more prevalent. They have kick, power, scale. They sound humongous, right? The Fleetwood DeVilles can play as loud as you want. They'll never get harsh. They're a little soft up top. They give you that warm velvet hug, big sound stage, really nice imaging. Dyn Audio Heritage Specials are a little sharper up top, have a little more impact and kick. They sound smaller than the DeVilles, but they also have a nice prevalent treble energy, right? Some people think they're a little too hot up top, but I think that's what gives them the life. And they do everything really, really well. There's really not many weaknesses in the Dyn Audio Heritage Special, but compared to the Vox 3A, the Heritage Specials sound a little bit more sterile and a little bit more flat, because the Vox 3As, even though they're really small, they're very big for their size. The voice sounds, I'd say, about 70% as big as they do on the DeVilles, which is crazy impressive, because the DeVilles have the biggest voice mids I've ever heard in a speaker, even the Klipsch Cornwall. So these little magical marvels, when set up correctly, can fill your space with music very well. And if you're in a smaller room, you're going to get even more of that bass energy that these are known for. But that ribbon tweeter for me is the star of the show because they literally just make the music so airy and beautiful. And if you're listening to vocals, I was listening to some vocals the other day, some classic jazz, right? And it was just so intimate. Debbie listened to them. I said, what do you think of these? And she said, they're very intimate. They're very detailed. And she said, it's like you're looking through a window, but you take the glass out, right? That's how transparent these are. And I fully agree with her. With these speakers, if you position them correctly, have them in the right size room, and power them properly, with a piece of gear that syncs with them very well, that synergizes with them, and you like that transparent, holographic, precise imaging, dissecting of the music kind of sound, I don't think you can get much better than the Vox 3A. And they're made with passion. They're a pride of ownership piece. So if that's the kind of music you like, these may be up your alley. They're also chameleon-like because when I set them up closer to the walls, which reinforce that bass energy, which will bring more bass into the room, the bass didn't get sloppy or bloated. It was super tight, but it was more prevalent. This allowed me to listen to heavy metal, rock, that kind of music. And while not as big and giant as my DeVilles, and while not as warm and velvety as the DeVilles, these are like the yang to the DeVille's yin, right? Yin and yang, two different kind of speakers. If I could afford it, I would buy the 3As as my bookshelf reference because I don't think I've heard a finer, more audiophile sounding pair of bookshelf speakers than the Vox 3A. They can envelop you with magic. They can disappear. They will sound fluid. And mostly you're going to hear that very airy treble, and that is what makes these the king, in my opinion, of imaging and transparency. So there's my thoughts on the Vox 3A speakers. They're absolutely beautiful. They're absolutely tiny. They'll be a perfect small room system would be these speakers. Check this out. Along with the Enlium Amp 23 and just a Blue Sound node running for streamer and DAC, that can make a very simple yet audiophile, extremely high quality little room, bedroom, office, small room system. That would just blow your mind in how beautiful these speakers can sound. And really quick, I have the Grimm MU1 streamer here, which is a $13,000 streamer. I have the Dana Fripp's Terminator Plus DAC. I have the Hi-Fi Rose 150 and a Blue Sound node. I tried them all. The Grimm and the Dana Fripp's was world class, absolutely analog sounding, beautiful. The Rose 150B was a little more closed in. The Blue Sound node running streamer and DAC was actually really good, guys. It wasn't up there with the more expensive pieces, but it was close, and it was something that I really could get into. So for a small system, if you want a high quality audiophile system for a small room, the Vox 3A, the Enlium Amp 23, and the Blue Sound node can be a perfect, really cool high-end system for a small room. But I really enjoyed my time with these guys. They're very pleasing to look at, and they're very magical in sound. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you want to see more, thumbs up and subscribe, as I will be back really soon. I still have to talk about that Grimm MU1 streamer, which is a beautiful streamer for those looking for the best possible performance out of a streamer. You may want to see that review. So I'll see you guys next time. I love you all. Thank you for being here from the bottom of my heart. I'll see you next time. Bye.